Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, Bobby, we are back, and I know for our listeners and viewers, we're here every week, but for you and I, it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded because we had some in the can. And we are just kind of wrapping up summer here, Bobby. So before we get started into our topic today, which is going to be a good one, how you been? How is summer closing out for you?
Hey Greer, great to see you. Yeah, it's been nice to have a few weeks off, if you will. I mean, I was still working in the office, but I did take the last week or so off and flew the family out to California, where we visited with my mom and my sister. I grew up in a little town just north of San Francisco in West Marin County. The town's actually called Bolinas. If you want to check it out, beautiful. This little village, if you will. I grew up on a dirt road. It's mostly dirt roads. There's no street lights or anything like that. So, and really a kind of a surfer farm town. So always great to get back to. It's like a 12-hour door-to-door thing. So very exhausting to travel with two little kids, as you can imagine. But always feels really special when we're out there. They get exposed to something different, and we have a great time.
I love it. I love the thought of some of like towns that are frozen in time, and it sounds like that's a little slice of heaven where it's probably a lot of it's like just similar to when you grew up and obviously so different than where you are now, which has to be pretty cool. But okay, you have to tell me about the travel though, because you just said 12 hours door to door with your littles. So anything crazy happen I mean, you obviously survived, but
Yeah, we obviously survived barely. Actually, on the way back, it was a little touch and go. We so you've been at your staying in your mom's small house for a week. You're out of your routine. The pillows aren't the same as your pillows at home. The mattress isn't the same, and you're just kind of tired and ready to get home. So you make the trek back to the airport. It's about an hour and a half drive to the airport, to San Francisco airport. And then, of course, you got to get there a couple hours early just to be safe. Good thing we did, because there was some paperwork, or kind of the tickets weren't quite right. So they had to figure those out. That took some time. We finally get on the plane. No, wait, there was a delay. There was a delay because they had to do maintenance. So I think we got on the plane 45 minutes late. We're on it. We're like, okay, strapped in, ready to go. Plane pulls out, heading towards heading to take off. Captain says, flight attendants prepare for takeoff.
okay.
And nothing happens. And then we slowly keep driving. And then we stop, and I look to my left out the window, and we're back at the gate. And it's like, oh no. Yeah. And so the captain comes on. He's like, hey, that maintenance we did before, apparently it didn't stick. The light came on again. So to be extra cautious, we need you guys to deplane. And oh God, that is like a yeah,
No.
horrible feeling. It's so, you can just feel the entire plane getting disappointed. So we deplane, and they put it back on delay status. They're like, okay, well, our maintenance guys need to take the plane out and see if they can get the light to come back on, and see what it is. So it's back on delay. And I tell Kathleen, I'm like, I'm almost positive this is going to get canceled. Just prepare yourself. This is going to get canceled, and there's probably not any other direct flights back to Chicago. I think there's a high likelihood that we're going to be spending the night here. And about 20 minutes later, they announce the flight's canceled. They say, okay, everyone's got to go out security, go to the special assistance line, and talk to the agents for rebook.
Oh my gosh. You knew it. You absolutely knew it.
I've been around the block a little bit as far as traveling. So at this point, I know exactly I feel it, what's exactly is gonna happen, and that's that there's gonna be a huge line to talk to, like, 2 agents. So I tell Kathleen immediately, I'm like, "We gotta decide what we're doing. I think you should watch the kids. I'm gonna."
I'm sprinting.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and I
No,
and I
leaving you guys in the dust. Here we go.
and that's what I did. I grabbed one bag, sprinted. I was running through the airport, made it out security, made it to the special assistants, was first in line. That was a little
Yeah.
yeah, that was a
Okay.
victory. So then I talked to the guy and he's like, "Yeah, so the best we can do is basically a flight up to Seattle and then a red eye home." And I think I called Kathleen. I'm like, "This is our option." I'm like, "This doesn't sound good." She's like, "Oh no, we can't do that." Like a 3 and a 5-year-old on a red eye after being traveling all day, the whole
Yeah,
plane
that's
hate us.
yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
So they ended up putting us on a flight the next morning to go up to Seattle. And then my wife, in her infinite wisdom, said, why don't we spend the night in Seattle and just make it a little mini vacation?
Make it fun.
Make it fun, make lemonade.
I love it.
Yeah.
Make it a lemonade.
So that's what we did. So the next morning, we headed up to Seattle. We got put up in a hotel by the airline, and then we headed up to Seattle. We booked our own hotel to stay that night. We worked it out with the airline in order to come home the next day after that, and we did all the fun touristy stuff in Seattle. Went to the Space Needle, took a harbor cruise, went to the waterfront. Yeah, it was awesome. So, and then we, ate seafood, went out for a nice dinner with the kids, went to a great pizza place, Rocco's. If you're in Seattle, check out Rocco's. Definitely recommended. Very good pizza. And we came home. So it was a really nice ending to what was initially disappointing. So, uh,
Wow. That is just such a great example of, you know what, you were dealt something that, was disappointing and potentially could have like ruined the end of your vacation experience, like your trip home. And instead, you got creative and you just made this little memory out of it. I love that.
yeah, honestly, it turned out really nice. I mean, we were exhausted, we were ready to be home, but it gave us all this new energy, and we got to do stuff with the kids that they were just pumped about. Luke's 5. He was so excited to go up in the Space Needle in the elevator, to go on the monorail, to like do all this stuff. So I think that we made some core memories with the kids and made the best of it. So
That's amazing.
yeah, it was
That's
fun.
amazing, and that's the beauty of summer too, like, they're not in school, so you get a little bit more flex and all that
Yeah.
good stuff. Well, I love it. All right, well, Bobby, we are here today to, get down to talk about divorce, and we've got quite a topic. We are gonna be talking about kind of the overarching theme here today is diplomacy over drama, because drama can happen, unfortunately, we all know when you're going through a divorce. And sometimes it could just feel like this pressure cooker, right? And it's coming from all angles. There's just so much pressure. And we want to kind of talk through some things today to maybe like relieve some of that pressure. How do you feel about that today? I know you love to not have drama and to things to go well.
Yeah, I love to not have drama, and actually I feel like I kind of thrive in scenarios where there is drama around me, and I'm one of those people that naturally wants to flatten the drama and make it go.
Oh,
I
okay. So you're like a
I
drama, you like can fix the drama. I like this.
yeah, I think everybody has kind of unique talents or things that come naturally to them, and they feel very comfortable in what might feel like a high stress situation. To one person, another person feels very comfortable. I'm sure there's many things for me where I would feel completely stressed out, but for another person it would just be like another walk in the park. Well, for me, that is being around dramatic, tense situations. Like I come in there and go, "Oh, this is a fun challenge. How can we get everybody to kind of calm down and be rational and feel like they're more in control, feel like they're heard. So I love talking about diplomacy and navigating drama in the context of divorce. And we're going to do it today.
I love it.
And we're going to do it today in the context of kind of the 90 days before divorce. So
Yes. So that
countdown.
Yeah, that 90 days is a really crucial time, I'm imagining. And I could just see you coming in. You're like the drama diffuser. So here we are, 90 days out, and here's our drama diffuser is Bobby. So let's start with first. Let's talk about just overall, because you're really gifted at this, calming the storm, right? So there's obviously a lot of emotional attachment. So what would you say, like, what's kind of your first move when you're seeing the situation? Like, okay, there's a lot of drama going on. You know, your job is to help calm the storm. What do you do?
So I think that if you're so let's put ourselves in the shoes of the listener. You're going through this process, and we picked 90 days because I think that's really when like, we need to be at the place where we know we're going to get divorced. Like, that's where this makes sense. And if you can say, okay, I'm at the place where it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, that's when the 90-day timer starts. That's when we need to say to ourselves, okay, if I'm truly going to get divorced, and it's not going to be some far off thing where it's going to be 5 years from now, because I know that I'm going to stay in the house until the kids graduate high school, but I know I'm going to divorce. So I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and wait it out 5 years, which some people do. And I'm not here to say that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's just a thing. But if you're going to get divorced, you've decided it, you want to start the process, but you're super angry. You're like just mad at the world, mad at the situation. You're sad that your marriage is ending. You're grieving that your marriage is ending. You're, resentful. Whatever's happened in your situation, the first thing that we need to do is really get some control over those emotions. Because if those emotions are pouring out and you're doing the blame game, if you're having these vicious, toxic arguments and fights with your spouse, there's zero room for there to be a productive divorce conversation. So you need to figure out, what are you going to do? What's your game plan in order to get control over those emotions? And until you have, maybe I should kind of modify a little bit. I would say it's not just the decision to get divorced that should start the 90-day timer, but it's really you getting to a place where you've resolved some of those big feelings and you're a little bit more under control with those big feelings. So really the thing that I would be thinking strongly about, and I'm a big proponent of, is therapy. And people who've done therapy, that's an easy one. Like, yeah, absolutely, you should do therapy, do some sort of counseling to figure this out. If you've never done therapy, that can feel really intimidating. You might have a lot of ideas about what therapy is or what it isn't. But I would highly, highly encourage you to go to a therapist and talk this out if you are living in a place of a lot of anger, sadness, grief with your marriage, and you don't feel like you're capable of having productive conversations with your spouse. We got to figure those feelings out. We got to resolve them internally before we can talk with our spouse about the process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes a mistake that people make is, obviously you have your community of people too. It may be friends, it may be family, that, are supporting you through your divorce, which those relationships are so important. But I do feel like you have to be careful of the type of conversations and some of the big emotions that you're working through with those people, because sometimes they're like intermixed into the situation with you. And so they also may have big feelings, about it. And the great thing about a therapist is they don't have any skin in the game. Like they are outside of the situation, they can see the situation clearly, and honestly, if you say something that maybe you don't mean, that maybe you just need to get out or you've got to work through, the therapist isn't holding it against your spouse. Where if you're saying that to maybe one of your parents, a close friend, somebody who's in that situation, it might be harder for them to either hear the information or not be like emotionally involved. And sometimes it like feeds the fire and the drama can get worse, when you're kind of having some of those conversations with close people. So I love that idea of a therapist because they're just removed from the situation, right?
Absolutely. They're objective, and I think it's really easy. A lot of people might say, "Well, I don't need a therapist. I have my girlfriends to talk to, or I go out with my boys and we talk about stuff, or at least that's how I, kind of get away from this." But especially kind of the idea of like, um, you have your girlfriend circle that you're sharing with, and that is some sort of therapeutic environment when, it might be really nice. And I think it's an important component of your support system, but it's really not therapy. I mean, even, and this is even if your, one of your friends is a therapist, and I've been in the situation before. I know other people are too. I have a family member who always, is like, I don't need therapy. My next door neighbor is a therapist. I talked to her over the fence. I'm like, yeah, that's not the same. A therapist, a good friend might be a great friend to hang out with because they validate all of your feelings, or they, how can I say, they might pile on to it. They, you might be venting about your spouse and then you just get in kind of a rant session, and it might feel good in the moment, but you're not really growing as a person as far as understanding that feeling on a deeper level. What happens in therapy when you talk through something, you start to understand the context of your reactions, why you're reacting that way. Maybe it's related to something that happened in your childhood, usually is. Maybe it's related to some sort of other trauma, the relationship trauma that you've had, and that's why you're being so easily triggered by this thing. Maybe, there's a bunch of different kind of realizations that you'll make in therapy that'll really help you navigate these emotions, compartmentalize them in a way so you can talk to your spouse. So therapy, therapy, therapy.
Therapy. Well, I know there's 2 areas in particular that, to be honest, you just should really stay away from. So why don't we kinda talk about those a little bit, and you can say why. Now, 1, you never wanna vent to your kids because they're involved, right? And then also social media over the last decade has just become, a place where people just vent all their stuff, but it can be tricky in divorce. So why don't you kind of go through some of those reasons of like, hey, let's just steer clear of, venting to your kids or venting on social, because there's actually like real repercussions for doing that.
Absolutely, there's real repercussions. I mean, the kids one, and I don't think people do this like intentionally most of the time. I think they're just venting, they're angry at the situation, but they start taking things out on the kids, they start blaming the other side around the kids, and the best way that I've heard it put is children's self-esteem is a product of both of their parents. So if you're bashing the other parent in front of the kids, even if it's kind of passive aggressively, or directly, you're basically telling the kids implicitly that there's half of their self-esteem, or half of what they find, where they find their value, is problematic. And kids will internalize that, and ultimately, they'll be end up in therapy later feeling like the divorce was their fault, feeling like their parents' marriage didn't work out because it was their fault. So we have to be really careful about how we communicate this with the kids, just from that perspective. And also, the more you do, if you communicate with your kids, if you're always bashing the other parent, whatever it is, that's going to hurt your custody case. So there's a very practical reason not to do it as well. And same on the social media side. You putting this stuff out online, one, it can be used against you in your custody case. And two, it just creates a really nasty environment to be able to solve anything productively. Like, it doesn't, you might be incredibly angry at your spouse. You want to be validated by the world to say, oh yeah, you're right, they're wrong. But no one wins in that, no one wins in that scenario. You don't get, just because you get 100 likes on your post doesn't mean you're any closer to your divorce. You're probably further away.
Right, right. Okay, so why don't we talk about a couple of maybe practical ways that maybe some takeaways that if you're in the middle of that storm, what is our diffuser, our drama diffuser, Bobby? What would be some practical things that they could do in addition to talking to a therapist?
Yeah, I think if we feel like we have some really strong emotion, we want to send some sort of email or text message or have a conversation with our spouse about something, and we feel that anger boiling up. I think just pausing and taking a beat, taking 24 hours, talking to somebody else about it first, figuring out ultimately, why am I saying this to my spouse? What's the end goal? And feeling more strategic about it is how we get there. And one of the ways that we can do this, or kind of provide more foundation for this, is by mapping out what our vision is. And kind of business leaders, entrepreneurs do this all the time when they're starting a business. It's a really powerful tool, and it can work for any area of your life. But if you spend some time, even just an afternoon, thinking about, what do I want my life to look like after this divorce? Where do I want to be living? What do I want the custody situation to look like? And you got to ground it in reality. You can't just be like, well, I want the kids full time and I never want to see my spouse again. Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
work.
That's not really an option, most
Not really an
likely.
option. But spend some time really articulating on paper, describing what things feel like, smell like, look like, what your day to day is, and create the life on paper that you want. Create this vision and hold on to that. Because if you're thinking about, you want to get through this divorce quickly, you want to maintain a healthy relationship with your spouse so you can co-parent, well, that doesn't really jive with you having, these explosive conversations with your spouse during the process. Like, that is just going to be a downward spiral, and really hurt that co-parenting relationship in the long run. So having a solid vision of where you're going can help you maybe make some better decisions in the moment as far as those emotions go.
Yeah, I love that advice. It's interesting you say that. I found this framed saying when I was going through my divorce, and it said, "She designed a life she loved." And I have it in my office, and I've had it in my office for almost a decade. And I look at it all the time, and I think about, when I was going through my divorce, and then the life that I've been able to create, since that. And it really has been the life that I envisioned for myself. And so it's been really special to like kind of have that piece, even when, and I found that in a time that I hadn't created the life. I was working toward that, right? So it's neat that it's still something I look at, so I love that idea of, thinking about, what do you want this to look like when all the craziness is done and over and you're just living again. So that's really good advice.
Yeah, and you'll be miles ahead of most other people if you just spend a little bit of time deliberately thinking about the life you want in 2, 3, 5 years. I mean, it takes volume as far as decisions. Like, it takes thousands of little decisions, and it takes repetition every single day, and doing things the right way and learning from our mistakes in order to craft that life, in order to design it. And divorce, I can't pretend to know exactly what divorce feels like. Like, I've talked about my own marriage, and that I do feel like I'm living in a very, like, I have worked hard to design my own life, and I live in a very happy marriage, 2 wonderful little kids. And if that was all taken away from me, I don't know what I would live for. So, like, if that fell apart, and I'm sure for a lot of people listening, they thought they had that, and they might be going, Bobby, you don't be so naive. Like, it can all go away. And if it did, I would be in a serious place of really figuring out, where do I go from here? What is this? And I would be grieving, I'd be sad, I'd be angry, I'd be confused. But I also know that time does heal all. And if we, the further we can get away from something, and if we can make the right decisions as we go through it, we can transform things and recreate a better situation. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Time truly is such a beautiful healer. Let's move on to our next kind of topic when it comes to this 90 days of the pressure cooker as you're getting closer to your divorce. And this, we're going to talk about the paper piece of things. So, when you're organizing files and finances and facts and one of the areas I'd love to just sort of talk about is and what your thoughts are is, there's a lot that you could potentially sort of be doing on your own. It would take some work on your end, especially on this paper side of things. And then, or you could take it to your office and say, hey, I just brought in all of these files and bags of receipts and la la la. Now I'm going to hand it to you. And I guess like maybe talking through some of those benefits of taking ownership of going ahead and going through those files, going through those receipts, understanding some of the quote paperwork of your marriage that is, going away and how that can kind of empower you and help you, during this pressure cooker time that you really need to, keep moving forward to get to that date.
yeah, a lot of the fear and the overwhelm that is associated with divorce comes from the unknown, comes from all of the fears about, well, what's going to happen with the finances? How am I going to support myself? How am I going to support 2 households? Whether or not I'm going to be getting maintenance, or what the retirement situation is going to look like, or, it feels like we have money, but do we actually have money? Because sometimes we find out that we don't through the divorce process. We find out maybe that we have a lot more debt than we thought. Or, from a month to month perspective, it seems like I can buy what I want and I don't really have to worry about it. But then when we get down to it, the financial situation is a little bit different. All of those fears thrive in an environment of the unknown. So, and I think this is a really great transition as far as going from how do we control our emotions, how do we avoid those angry flare-ups, to just more the mundane paperwork stuff. This is the stuff that is boring to do, but is so important to do. And that is getting a really good inventory of what you actually have. We're just talking like nuts and bolts. Like, get your credit report, so you have a clear understanding of what debts there are. Put an inventory of all the bank accounts that you have, of, listing out the vehicles that you have, listing out your mortgage. What is your house worth? What is the mortgage balance? So we can figure out how much possible equity is there. Putting a list of retirement accounts, stock accounts, those sorts of things. And you can, if you just Google Illinois financial affidavit divorce, the first link that you should see is the official Illinois financial affidavit document that you fill out in a divorce case. And it gives you a great starting place to truly inventory your whole financial situation. And so if you can get that organized and filled out, and you can get the documents that underlie those things, all your recent credit card statements, bank statements, retirement account statements, all of that, and put it together in one neat binder or PDF, you're going to save yourself so much headache and expense by the time that you do hire a lawyer. You're literally going to save money and time by doing that difficult, mundane homework on your own.
Yeah. Well, you know what I was thinking about too is it really ties into, your advice of envisioning what you want your life to look like, and if you're in that time, with the other step of, well, where do I want my life to look like? Well, now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of kind of the facts of like, hey, well, this is potentially, what I have or what I need to pay off or that because that is realistically going to play into what your life is going to look like, right? So once you have that information is power and it's powerful because that helps you plan for that next stage, as well. So they kind of work nicely together, I feel like.
Yeah, and your vision has to be grounded in reality, like we said. So if you're thinking, well, I want to keep the house, well, let's figure out then, what is the mortgage? What does it look like as far as, do I have to refi the house to get my spouse off of it? Am I eligible to refi it? What happens when I refi it? Is the interest rate going to go up? So now the monthly payment is, 50% more than it was before. Okay, well, keeping this house is really important to me. What other options are there? Is there, maybe a lateral career move that I've been contemplating that could increase my income? Does it make sense to really dig into that and look into that? Like, the more we figure out and understand the nuts and bolts of what has to happen logistically in order to get divorced, then we can start really game planning around it and unblocking some of those things. Sometimes we have to get to the place where we realize we can't keep the house.
Mhm.
That's a big one for a lot of people, is they're really scared about what's going to happen with the house. They want to keep the house, but then they look at the numbers and they realize, wait a minute, there's no way I can keep the house. My biggest mental hurdle as far as getting this divorce is letting go of the house. And once they can let go of the house emotionally, then they can get down to, really moving things along, getting the house appraised, getting the house on the market, and just doing what needs to be done.
Done. Yeah, I love that. I mean, yeah, the paper side of things really does help you get to the reality, and once you can accept reality, then you're able to move on realistically, which I love. So, real quick, I'd love for you to talk a little bit. We talked about social media, but we did not talk about like messaging in general and how like the message management and how important that is because there's text messages, there is, emails, that type of thing. And when you're in the height of potential drama, those can be tricky because whatever you physically write down can end up in court. So can you sort of talk about how to handle the messaging as far as like things that you're writing down, to kind of diffuse that drama if you're in that drama within the last, 90 days as you're approaching your divorce?
Yeah, I think, like you said, one of the most important things to know is things that you do write down can be used against you in court a lot easier than things that you say. So we want to be aware of that as far as if we are emailing with our spouse, that could be used against us potentially. That being said, sometimes email is a great way to go. It can be a lot better than even text messaging, because email, it feels a lot more deliberate. We sit down, we craft an email, we think about what we're going to say instead of firing off text
Right.
messages to the
It also
other
and it
side.
also feels fair that, like, an email is if you get back in 24 hours, that doesn't feel like someone's ghosting you, but, like, when you send a text and they don't respond, you sort of feel like, you expect a more immediate response in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the
It's that
I
feels
think the
personal. Do you ever feel like that? I feel like emails are like a text message. When you have someone's phone number, it's really personal, right? But like sometimes you have people's emails that you don't have their phone number. So it almost puts you in that like business mindset. Would you say that could be true? Like, like you're like how you would craft a business email.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more that we can move this into more of a transactional sort of mindset, I mean, if we can get to the place where we understand that we're really just trying to broker a deal, I mean, close a deal here with our spouse, the most complicated deal, the most emotional deal that's ever been done, but that's what it is. So by sending emails, and I'm not saying, and I don't think you're saying either, that email is the end all be all.
No.
You might have the ability to really communicate well because you've done the therapy, or because you're just a good communicator with your words and you're able to compartmentalize your emotions. Then talking with them directly might be the way to go. But I guarantee that the people who are being productive in their communication, whether it's by email, text messages, or in person or on the phone, they're not blaming and they're not becoming the victim. They're not, when they get on the phone, they really, or when they communicate, it's really about the nuts and bolts. And if anything, you're taking responsibility and empowering yourself by when you receive that from the other side, because we can only control ourselves and the other side is not going to have the wisdom of this podcast. If they come at you with their emotions, with their anger, sometimes, a lot of times validating their feelings, being humble, apologizing can really go miles. I saw an interesting, I think it was just like a meme or something, a couple weeks ago, that talked about, it was like 99% of lawsuits could be avoided with a sincere apology and conversation, which I think is totally true. I mean, if we're talking about, medical malpractice here. We're talking about car accidents, employment situations, divorce. Most of the time, no, most people don't want to go into court and fight. They just want to be validated. They just want to be heard.
Such a good
And
point.
yeah, so if you can be that person that provides that validation, and you can put your ego aside and validate a feeling and apologize for something, that can create some amazing space to actually be able to negotiate a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at you. You're teaching everybody out there how to diffuse drama, Bobby. This is just really, really good stuff today. I love it. Okay, so let's round it out. This is gonna be our final one. Solve the big rocks first. And what we mean by that is taking those high level problems, solving those, and then getting to the smaller ones, because you don't want to be so obsessed with the minutia, like these little things that we're missing the big point. So could you sort of talk through what are kind of those big first heavy rocks that you're going to need to make sure you've worked out, so that you can get the ball rolling for the smaller stuff?
Yeah, don't fight over who's gonna get Christmas Eve and Christmas Day first. Like, don't fight over what the child support amount is gonna be first. Start with, like, the big high level concepts of, um, are we going to share parenting time roughly 50-50? Are we gonna share decision making roughly 50-50? Are we going to keep the house?
Mhm.
Are we going to keep the cars? Is there going to be maintenance? And even the maintenance one is tricky. because maintenance can be it can definitely be a hot topic, can be somewhat of a third rail. One person might feel like they're entitled to this payment from their spouse. The other person might feel like they really shouldn't have to make that payment. Um, and there's options around maintenance. There's buyouts for maintenance, basically saying, well, you would be getting X amount of dollars per month. Instead of that, why don't you get a lump sum?
Mm.
So we don't even necessarily need to figure out maintenance. And if your spouse says, well, I'm entitled to maintenance, I want maintenance, leave that open. Don't give it a hard no or anything like that. Just say, like, I'm open to discussing that. You don't want to close the door on anything necessarily when there could be options around it, but we really want to figure out the big picture. Then the other, I think, big rock here, big high level thing we need to decide is, do we want to do this in court or out of court? Like, start with the one that's almost obvious. Like, hey, I want to figure this out with you. I'm hoping that we can avoid court for the sake of our kids and the sake of our wallets. Are you on board with that? Are you on board of us trying to figure this out, whether it's just negotiating with or without lawyers, or doing mediation? And we can usually start with a yes on that. So if you can get an agreement on the process with your spouse, even if it's just the process, that might be as far as you can get, because there might be major disagreement on some of the bigger things. But if you can agree with them, like, okay, I know that we're not seeing eye to eye on the kids or the house, but would you agree to go to mediation with me? And that's usually, like, you got to kind of bring it back to the first thing that you might be able to agree on.
Yeah, because you could go back to that
There.
and be like, "Well, we agreed we didn't wanna go to court, and this is kind of we've gotta figure this out, or we're gonna have to go to court." Yeah, I mean, it feels like, yeah, you could always go back to something that you agreed upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of going to be your foundational place. I'm a big believer that 99% of divorces can be resolved out of court, can be resolved within a matter of 60 to 90 days, can be negotiated. It doesn't need to turn into this years long battle in court, but we need to be careful with our messaging, with how we present to our spouse, with owning our own emotions, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Bobby, it's so interesting. We spent this whole episode talking about how you were the master of diffusing drama. And, I was thinking about the fact that you started this whole episode of honestly, like some drama that your family was in with your kids. If it had just been you and your wife, I feel like flight cancellations are not like you get over it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
with kids, that's this extra level of stress. So you could have been in this scenario, like high stress, really freaking out, right? But you figured out a way how to diffuse it. And then you had this like wonderful extra vacation that, you weren't even expecting. And so I love to think through that, like, if you're able to kind of diffuse some of that drama in your divorce, maybe it's not going to be as bad as you think, right?
Absolutely. I love that you brought it back to that, because I think the way that we got to the place in our vacation that could have been a lot worse, could have been a lot more stressful, was both my wife and I were in a problem solving mindset. We were solution focused when this happened. It started, I think, when we got off the plane, and when the flight was canceled, I was ready to take action.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, I'm running to this special assistance outside of security. And it's like that sort of action, being willing to do the work. And as I'm running through the airport terminal, part of me is like, oh, this is kind of goofy. Like, I'm that guy. I feel like I'm in, what's that game show? Is it the Great American Race, or what's
Oh,
that
yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Great
They race
American.
around the world. Like, I literally thought that. I think I texted my wife and I'm like, I'm pretty sure we would win that show.
Like, we would crush. Where is the casting director?
Um, but I was willing to take that action. I was willing to kind of put my ego aside and not worried about kind of the embarrassment of, like, I'm booking it through the airport, whatever. People can think what they want to think.
Yeah, Bobby, they're either embarrassed that you're running, or you're embarrassed when your kids are screaming on the red eye,
Yeah, it's one or the other. So then I get, once I get there and we're making things happen and the energy is solution focused, that opened the door to my wife, who is, and I think she would agree with me on this. She's usually the one that's pretty frustrated and anxious in these situations, and doesn't as easily open her mind to kind of the creative or the glass half full sort of option. But she was the one who said, hey, what if we just spend a night in Seattle? And I think that kind of all came together because we were both in a very much action-oriented, solution-focused mindset. And so the more you can do that in your divorce, the more action-oriented, solution-focused you can be, you have such a better chance of this going smoothly and staying out of court.
Wow, what a way to bring it back, Bobby. I mean, that was pretty awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here today, chatting with me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation. If there's any questions you have or any topics you want us to discuss, please reach out, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.